Good evening to everybody. Hope everybody had a good day and a good afternoon, a restful afternoon, hopefully. If you have not gotten an outline yet, please raise your hand, and those will be passed out. I'm sorry I did not have those printed up earlier, so they are literally hot off the press. The papers may actually literally be hot. So glad to be worshiping with you tonight. That was an encouraging service we had this morning, and I thought Brian did an excellent job. And what a big number we had with all those visitors with Robert. We had almost 200 people packed like sardines in here. It was great. I really enjoyed that. In the adult Bible class, as those of you who are in the class know, right now we're studying Deuteronomy. And one of the things that Moses does in the book of Deuteronomy is he reminds the children of Israel the things that they've seen God do. And as we think about that particular generation that Moses was preaching to and their parents, they had seen amazing things. Coming out of Egypt, they, of course, saw the 10 plagues and the dividing of the Red Sea, and they saw God protect them at Rephidim, miraculously as they were attacked by the Amalekites. They saw God pour water out of a rock, for enough water for a few million Jews out there in the wilderness. They saw the ground open up and swallow Korah, Dathan, and Abiram alive. The things that they saw would have just been astounding. Now, you and I don't have the advantage of being able to see those miracles. The fact that we can't see what they saw, a lot of people today are very skeptical of the Bible because we're not seeing, we can't see water coming out of a rock or a sea parted and the things that they saw. And so many people discount the Bible record because of the lack of miracles happening today. And so I want to deal with that skepticism, and I also want to deal with the question, what is a miracle and what is not a miracle? As well as the question, why don't we see miracles today? And kind of answer that. So this is kind of a catch-all lesson on the topic of miracles that I'm just entitling Understanding Miracles. So I'm hoping that it will be encouraging. I'm hoping that it will bolster your faith. And so let's start with this question. How can we know that miracles really happened? How can we know that the miracles in the Bible are real? I want to start out with an illustration. Most of the information that I'm getting for this lesson came from a book called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And in the book, it talks about this man named Ronald Nash, who was a seminary professor and went with the goal of convincing these Russian educators that there's a God. Well, that's a tall order. I mean, he had his work cut out for him because, as you probably know, basically the state religion of Russia is atheism. And they are trained to believe that there is no God and that believing in an afterlife and believing in God, that's all just a bunch of fairy tales. That's what they're taught. And so here is this man, Ronald Nash, and he's standing before these Russian educators with this task of trying to convince them that there's a God. So he tried to make it really simple. And he had two boxes, and I meant to bring two boxes, but it's just been one of those days. And one was open and the other one was closed. So first, pointing to the one that was closed, he said, I want to explain to you all the difference between your worldview and mine. And he said, you believe is all that there is. And so just like this box is closed, in your view, the universe is closed. And there's no one outside that universe. The universe is all there is. He said, what I believe, and then he turned to the box that was open. He said, I believe that the universe is open. And that there is someone outside that universe, which is God. And God created the box. And then he reached inside of that open box. And he said, just like I can reach in here and move things around in this box, God can reach into our universe and he can intervene. And for whatever reason, that was just a very effective illustration for these Russian educators. And according to the book, that got them to really thinking, you know what, maybe there is evidence that there is a God. Maybe, in fact, there's more evidence. And I think that was a great way for him to sort of open up that whole discussion. I say all that to say that I do believe that there is tremendous evidence that the box is open and that there's somebody outside that box that is God. In fact, I believe that there is better evidence for theism than for atheism. There's better evidence for belief in God than for believing there is no God. And this is not the lesson for me to go into the detail of that, but I love the prayer, and I really appreciate that prayer. You know, the fact is we live in a world of design, of incredible design, down to the cellular level. One expert was asked, how complex is the cell? And he said, it's as complex as the universe. You can't even begin to understand the complexity of a single cell. And so, of course, the verse Romans 1:20 comes to mind where Paul says, for since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes have been clearly seen. They're invisible, but they've been clearly seen. Even His eternal power and Godhead, having been understood by the things that are made, so that they, the unbelievers, are without excuse. Now, I sort of jumbled that up. That was my own version of that verse. But I think I got all the concepts in there. I mean, you know, Buddy Payne does a whole series on that very concept alone. I do believe there's better evidence for theism than atheism. And so if a person can accept that there's a higher power, if a person can admit God, well, I believe that we therefore must admit the miraculous. And so that really is what you have to accept. So the box is open, and if the box is open and there's God outside the box, then we have to believe that God can reach in and He can intervene and He can manipulate whatever's inside that box. But someone might say, well, yeah, but the miracles in the Bible are so far-fetched. You've got a talking donkey, talking to Balaam. You've got, a rock, like I said earlier, with water gushing out of a rock. You got Joshua commanding the sun to stand still for an entire day. You know what that would take? It's just far-fetched. Okay, but if somebody agrees that there is a God, that there is a creator, I want you to think about the logic here. Here is a being that is so infinitely powerful that in 6 days He spoke every single galaxy. I don't know how many billions of galaxies or billions of stars. I had those figures one time. Nobody knows exactly, but there's a lot. And, of course, our galaxy and our planet with everything perfectly tailor-made for life and the life on the planet. God created all of that. According to Genesis chapter 1, He did that in 6 days, basically the blink of an eye. Can you even begin to fathom the absolute power of a being who can do that? We can't begin to fathom that. If God can create the universe, can He make a donkey talk? Sure. Can He make water come out of a rock? Could He make the sun stand still or do anything He wanted to do? Absolutely. He's God. He created the box. He can reach into that box and do anything He wants. This would, to me, be the easiest answer. How can we know that miracles really happened? But you first have to get somebody convinced that there's a higher power in the first place. You can't get somebody there. You can't get them convinced that the miracles are true. We could talk about a lot of other lines of evidence. We could look at archaeology. There's fascinating archaeology about Jericho, for example, and the way that the walls fell and how that couldn't have happened by an earthquake and so forth. We could talk about fulfilled prophecy and look at how just looking at history itself can show you how certain prophecies are true, like hundreds of years later. We could talk about all those things, but I just wanted to keep this really simple and answer that question, how can we know that miracles really happened, with basically Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If He did that, He can do anything. He can do anything. So there's no logical reason, if you accept that, to reject any of the miracles in the Bible. No logical reason at all. So then the next question, okay, so we've got an open box. And we are accepting that there's a being who can reach into that. So then the question is, well, what is a miracle? What is and is not miraculous? So that I could know if I happen to see one, or if I read in the Bible or whatever, if I hear somebody talking about some wonderful thing, how can I know what truly is a miracle and what is not a miracle? And I want to start answering this question with answering a common misconception, kind of correcting a common misconception, and that is that the Bible is just an endless flow of miracles from beginning to end. You just think of the Bible days, and it was just like everywhere you went for all those centuries, there were just miracles all over the place. Bob Waldron says that some people think of miracles like a flower girl in a wedding, and it's just almost random, just little miracles over here and some miracles over there, and just that God was just kind of tossing miracles everywhere. But miracles were actually very intentional. And there are several periods of time where there weren't very many miracles or any miracles. And then there are certain periods of time where you have this great outburst of miracles all the time. I don't know if outburst is the right word, but that's the word that came to mind. My notes are on a receipt, so you'll have to deal with the words that I have in my head, which aren't too many. But that's not the case. So the Bible, okay, it is the case that there are sections, there are pockets of time where there is an outpouring, there's the word, of miracles, such as the time of Moses. Outpouring of miracles. Or Elijah and Elisha, outpouring of miracles. Or Jesus and the apostles. Why such an outpouring of miracles there? Okay, now I might be getting a little ahead of myself. Yeah, so I think what I just did is I said something I'm supposed to say later. So log that away. We're going to come back and finish that. So back to this question, what is and is not miraculous? Let me say this. Not all unusual events are miraculous. Now, a lot of people, they call everything a miracle, right? And so what we're going to do is look at 6 categories of unusual events. And the first one is miracle. So let's look at miracles first. Now, if we were to look at the 250 instances of miracles in the Bible, there are about 250 instances, okay? I think that we would see that all of them would meet the following qualifications, at least these qualifications. So here's how I think the Bible defines a miracle or a sign or whatever synonym would go along with the word miracle in the Bible. A breach of natural law caused by God for a good divine purpose. So it's a breach of natural law. In other words, it's something that is not just amazing, it's impossible. It's just impossible inside the box to normally happen, right? And it's caused by God intentionally for a good purpose. In other words, for a purpose that would meet His will. And that purpose would also be a divine purpose or a spiritual purpose, not just a physical purpose. So let's take the resurrection of Jesus, for example. That was a breach of natural law because people don't normally rise from the dead. It was caused for a good purpose, the purpose being for Jesus to ultimately be able to sit at God's right hand. He had to rise from the dead and to show the world that Jesus is the Messiah. And the purpose was divine, or the purpose was spiritual. In other words, it wasn't just God raised Jesus from the dead so He wouldn't be dead anymore. And that really helped Jesus out because He didn't want to be dead anymore. I mean, that would be ridiculous. And so you could look at all miracles. Look at Jesus feeding the 5,000. A breach of natural law caused by God for a good divine purpose. It wasn't just to feed 5,000, was it? It was to show people that He is the Messiah and that His word is true, and so forth. We could look at the creation of the world. Any miracle, I think you could look at and you can see that that definition holds up. Okay? Now that we've established that definition, let's look at these other categories of unusual events that are not miraculous. So the next one would be providence. Now, I said earlier, Christians throw around, and people in our culture throw around the word miracle all the time. Sometimes we call things miraculous that are really just providential. Providence is when God does something, either directly or indirectly, but He stays within the laws of nature. He does not perform a miracle, or else it wouldn't just be providence, it would be a miracle. Let me give you an example of that, a concrete example of that, is Elijah. When God told him the rain's coming, it had not rained for 3.5 years in the land. And so Elijah went on Mount Carmel and he prayed. Remember, he put his face between his knees and he told his servant Gehazi to go and see if there's anything. Nothing. And he kept praying and asking his servant to go out 7 times until the 7th time his servant said, do you remember what his servant said? I see a cloud the size of a man's hand. And it was that cloud that became the thundercloud from which God poured forth the rain. Is that a miracle? It depends on how you define miracle. But if you're using the Bible definition of miracle, which I think is what we need to do, then that's not a miracle. In order for it to be a miracle, God may have just poured forth rain out of a clear blue sky. That would have been a miracle, right? But to cause a cloud to come was providential. And so that's why James can say in James 5 that Elijah was a man with a nature like ours. And he prayed that it wouldn't rain, and it didn't rain. He prayed that it would rain, and it did rain. Elijah was a man like we are. And so we're not going to be able to do miracles, but we can do what Elijah did. We can pray for the rain, and a cloud might come. Or any other number of things that would still fit the natural laws that God has set in order in this great box that we call the universe. Another category of unusual events is satanic signs. So let's turn in our Bibles to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter. And here Paul is talking about the man of lawlessness, and we don't know who that is. Brian did an excellent lesson on that and helped us know a little bit better who it might have been or what kind of person it might have been. But in verse 9, let's start in verse 8. He says, then that lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth and bring to an end by the appearance of his coming. That is, the one whose coming is in accord with the activity of Satan, with all power and signs and false wonders, and with all the deception of wickedness for those who perish because they did not receive the love of the truth, so as to be saved. So this one would have power from Satan. And Satan would be doing something in that case that would be convincing people to follow basically his way. But could we say that those miracles would be true miracles? Because if they were, then what we would have is Satan on equality with God, and we would have a competition going on. And how would you know between a true miracle and a false miracle? Jesus said in Matthew 24, for false Christs and false prophets will arise and will show great signs and wonders, so as to mislead, if possible, even the elect. If you weren't discerning enough, you could be misled by those, as he says there, those great signs and wonders. But we cannot put those on equality with a true miracle from God. So let's go now to the 4th category, psychosomatic. Did you know some allergy problems are not real allergy problems, but are in people's heads? That can happen. And a person can realize that he just sneezed because he saw flowers and he realized that they were plastic flowers. And that can happen. Our brain has the ability to cause a powerful effect on our bodies, for bad or for good. There's a book that someone wrote on how he basically was cured of cancer through laughter. You don't think laughter is powerful? It has a powerful effect on our body. Your attitude, a positive mental attitude, can have a powerful effect on your lifespan and on your health. Yes, there's all kinds of research about this. Psychosomatic. Don't you like that word? We don't use that word every day, and I know I gave you a long one to write down. I would say that a lot of faith healing that you see on TV would fit this category of psychosomatic. I don't know if some of the faith healing might be people who were paid to look like they got healed. I don't know. I wouldn't doubt it, but I've not done any research. But I am pretty sure that some of those people really thought they were healed because they were in such a mental state of mind as to believe it, and it actually caused some kind of change to make them feel better or perform some better than they might normally do. All right, but basically the point is psychosomatic events are not miracles. Fifth category of unusual events would be magic. Stone likes magic tricks. We watched a video of David Blaine, street magician, one of the most famous in the world. Amazing. Things he can do with cards, even on a video from the 90s, will blow your mind. He can make it look like he levitates. And I watched it and could not figure out, how is he doing that? It's amazing. But of course we still know it's just smoke and mirrors, as they say. But the people watching, when he would do some of those tricks, they would say, that's otherworldly. What he just did, that's not right. They would think that he had the power of some divine being. They literally thought that. But of course it's not. In the Bible we read of some magicians, don't we? Didn't Pharaoh have some magicians who kind of copied and imitated the first two plagues, but then when it came to the lice, the plague of the lice, they couldn't imitate that one. In fact, they said this in Exodus 8. Then the magician said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." They could tell, the magicians could tell a difference. Don't we have an example like that in the New Testament? It's not in Exodus 8, but it's in Acts 8. And his name was Simon. We call him Simon the sorcerer. And this man, he could do things that would blow people's minds. But he wasn't doing it like David Copperfield. Hey, I want to show you all a magic show. And everybody knew it was a magic show. He was making out to be the great power of God. And that's what people were calling him. But when Philip the evangelist came to town and came to Samaria, he knew that what Philip was able to do, because the apostles had laid their hands on Philip, Simon the sorcerer was blown away. And in Acts 8:13, even Simon himself believed the message that Philip was preaching. And after being baptized, he continued on with Philip, and as he observed signs and great miracles taking place, he was constantly amazed. Here's the magician saying, that's the real deal right there. What I'm looking at is not magic. So we see that there's a clear difference there. Final category to consider here is anomalies. Anomalies are basically events that are like a freak of nature. You know, the northern lights are, I don't know if you could call that an anomaly, but it's kind of a freak of nature. In other words, it's not something we're going to see over the Orlando skies. You might even be able to put the events at Medjugorje in this category, where people have believed that they see apparitions of Mary. And maybe there was something they saw, but it wasn't Mary. There was no miracle there, but there's something that people were seeing that apparently, or claiming to see, that maybe would fit this category of anomaly. So we could say more, but basically here are 6 categories, and only one of these categories are miraculous. The rest of these are just unusual events that would not be appropriate to call miracles. And I want to add another point here. I thought about including this in that list, but it doesn't really fit. Not all amazing events are miraculous. The reason I didn't put it in the category of unusual events is because amazing events aren't necessarily unusual at all. Like the birth of a child. That's not unusual. Happens all the time. It's how every single human being on the planet got here. But it's amazing. And what do people call it? It's a miracle. Well, I don't want to poke fun, and I think I just did. But it is amazing, and it should cause us to glorify God, that a child can be conceived and can grow and develop inside of a womb of a woman, and that the parts from her body, that they become the child's body, and what she eats becomes what the baby eats, and eventually, I don't know how it all works. I probably just said stuff wrong. I wasn't planning on saying any of that. But you understand what I mean. It's amazing. And to God be the glory. But is it a breach of natural law? No, in fact, it's something God set up from the very beginning as part of His natural law, so it could continue throughout the rest of the world, from Adam and Eve on. And so there's nothing miraculous about it, but it's amazing. It's amazing. How about maybe the team that is not expected to win the Super Bowl? It's the underdog. And they have this great game where it's this come from behind, win and this great victory. People call that a miracle. I don't know. That was amazing maybe, but not a miracle. A marriage maybe that's on the rocks. The worst marriage you've ever seen, and then a few months later, it's one of the best marriages you've ever seen. Amazing, but is that a miracle? No, it's not a miracle. And so let's be careful in our minds that we know what is a miracle and what isn't a miracle, so that we can understand it properly. Well, the final question then is, why don't we see miracles today? So if we understand that true miracles are a breach of natural law caused by God for a good divine purpose. If we accept that, then we go, well, I don't see breaches of natural law happening. I don't see people walking on water. I don't see seas being parted. And I don't see the dead being raised. Why don't we see those things today? Now, this is a legitimate question that maybe you're asking. And all of us, if we're not asking it, I'm sure we have asked it. Why don't we see miracles today? Okay? Now this is the danger of not having notes, Brian. So, Brian really likes to have his notes, and sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. So I started making this very point in a totally wrong section. This is where I was saying earlier, in the Bible, miracles didn't occur all the time, right? They occurred at certain pockets of time. And the point that I was going to make there, before I realized I was making the right point in the wrong place, is I was going to say this. They happened when God was confirming new revelation or new messengers. So take Moses, for example. Why so many miracles in the days of Moses? God was confirming this man Moses as His prophet. He was confirming the revelation that was coming through Moses. Now, there was other things that those miracles were accomplishing, of course. But those are a couple of key things that were happening there. Or take Elijah and Elisha and the great outpouring of miracles that God was doing through their hand. Why? Well, they were trying to turn back the northern kingdom of Israel from the brink of destruction. And they were turning the nation back to repent. And so God was showing everybody, you need to listen to these men and the message that I'm giving through these men of repentance. Or think of the time of Jesus and the time of the apostles. Why such an outpouring of miracles then? Well, Jesus was basically establishing what was going to be the kingdom. And then once the kingdom was established, you have the apostles who needed to be recognized as authoritative men. God was confirming this new revelation and these new messengers. But like I said earlier, there weren't always miracles like that going on. There are only about 250 instances of miracles throughout the Bible. It's a lot, but it may not be as many as you might have thought if I'd asked you to guess the number. Take the years of silence, for example. Between Malachi and Matthew, are you aware that there are 400 years between the end of the Old Testament and where you start reading in Matthew? 400 years that we call the years of silence. Why do we call the years of silence? It's because God was silent. He wasn't revealing anything, and we have no recorded miracles during that time. Why? Why no miracles? Well, there was no new revelation. no new messengers to confirm. That may be an oversimplification. I'm sure there's more to it than that, but I like to simplify, and I think that's a good answer. In Mark 16:20, after Jesus ascended, it says, "And they, his apostles, went out and preached everywhere while the Lord worked with them and confirmed the word by the signs that followed." That is a concept we see, not just in that passage, but that is a concept we see all over the place. That I think that is one of the main reasons miracles were done in the Bible, is to confirm the Word. And so, today, there's no new revelation. God's not going to reveal anything more than what we have in the Bible. So therefore, there's no need for God to do miracles. I want to read in 1 Corinthians 13, if you will turn your Bibles to 1 Corinthians 13. Such a powerful passage to make this point. So this is the love chapter. And after all of the description of love and how it behaves in verses 4 through 7, he then says in verse 8, "Love never fails. But if there are gifts of prophecy, they will be done away. If there are tongues, they will cease. If there is knowledge," and I think in the context that would mean supernatural knowledge, "it will be done away." And he's talking to people at a time when supernatural spiritual gifts were still going on. And they were just head over heels about these gifts, especially speaking in tongues and stuff and prophecy. There was jealousy and all of that going on. And so he's telling them, listen, this stuff you think is so important, it's going away. It's temporary. Now look at verse 9. "For we know in part, and we prophesy in part." Now, he's speaking this to that first century audience. He's saying, the revelation that God is giving us through these supernatural gifts is in piecemeal fashion. We know in part, and we prophesy in part. But look at verse 10. "But when the perfect comes," and the Greek word there can be translated complete. It's the Greek word teleos, which is where we get the word telescope from. So it's the idea of seeing the end of something. To the end of something. Something is completed. So he's saying when the complete comes, the partial will be done away. The complete what? In the context, it would be the complete revelation. That's just logical in the context. I didn't insert that. When the revelation is complete, we don't need piecemeal revelation anymore. It'll be done away. If you got the whole pie, you don't want the single piece of pie anymore. You got the whole thing over here. And so he's pointing to that completed revelation. And brethren, we have the completed revelation. There's not going to be anything added to this that we have revealed. And therefore, there's no need for God to continue to do miracles, even though we might wish that we could see them. Really, biblical miracles are like laying the foundation of a house. You only got to lay that foundation once. You don't lay your foundation of your house and then, 10 years later, figure out a way to kind of lay it again. You laid it already. So the foundation has already been laid of confirming the Word and confirming the messengers. And all of that undergirds the gospel. And so there's no need for that to be done and established again. So it's very logical. It all makes perfect sense. Now, we didn't talk about the apostles laying their hands on others and eventually the apostles dying and those people dying, and there wasn't the ability for those people that the apostles laid their hands on, to lay their hands on others. We didn't get into that in this lesson. I just wanted to keep it real simple. But I hope that the three things that we have looked at have been helpful. We've answered 3 questions. How can we know that miracles really happened? What is not miraculous? And why don't we see miracles today? And I hope that the answers we've given have helped you or encouraged your faith, or both. The fact of the matter is, God's not done doing miracles. Now, by the way, I'm not saying God cannot do miracles today. He can do anything He wants. If He wants to reach in that box and do whatever He wants. I just gave you the logical reasons why I don't think there's any reason to believe that miracles are going to be happening today. But there are miracles that are prophesied, and they're going to happen. The dead are all going to be raised. What a miracle. Jesus has the power to call their voices, and the dead will all come out of the graves. You imagine? And the wicked will be raised to a resurrection of condemnation, and the righteous will be raised to a resurrection of life. And God is going to destroy the whole universe with fire, fervent heat. Again, what power! Try to fathom that. But if He created it, can He destroy it? Absolutely, He can. And so I hope we're all going to be ready for that day. Ready for the resurrection and ready for the judgment day. If you're not a Christian, you're not ready. And I would encourage you to become a Christian tonight. Why don't you come now as we stand and sing the song of invitation.